What's up, everybody? It's B-Ballin back, and I am here to bring you the group stage recap, in my opinion, as well as potential bracket that I think might happen at the main event. These right now are just completely randomized, but I just want to talk a little bit about the group stages. And now you can see that the prize pool has surpassed $20 million, which is a ridiculous sum. So my prize pool was 19 to 20. So I got it wrong. Feels bad. What can you do? So the group stages, I think I got 5 out of the 8 teams that I predicted to go to the upper bracket correct, which is pretty decent. I think the average TI analyst had around 4.6, so slightly above average for me. Of course, it would probably be 5 because you can't have half a prediction right for the average analyst. But anyways, just going to go over who I thought would make it through and who actually made it through. OG made it through. I thought they would make it through. Even MVP would make it through. I did not, or I did think they would. Well, I guess let's go back. So in Group A, I thought OG, EG, Wings, as well as Navi would make it through. And in Group A, only Alliance made it over on Navi. And Group B, I thought MVP, Newbie, Fnatic, as well as Liquid would make it through. And in fact, I predicted Liquid to win the whole thing. So obviously I was very wrong in Group B. But I do think a certain meta has sort of been established by the teams in Group B, where Group A was a lot more unpredictable in terms of heroes picked. And you can tell that this has been a very diverse TI. Over 100 heroes have been picked already, which is absolutely ridiculous. Very, very good hero diversity so far. A bit disappointed that my boy Centaur has not been picked, but he kind of sucks, so what can you do? So just going over each of the rounds, OG versus MVP. I'll talk a little bit about each team and their performance in the group stage as I go through the predictions. OG versus MVP. OG had a bit of a rough day one. They went 4-2, and a lot of 1-1s were given to them or were played out. They 1-1 EG and they 1-1 Wings, if I'm not mistaken. But they turned around. They had a bit of a weaker competition in days 2 and 3, but OG, when I think of them, I think of stability. You know, Miracle is amazing. No-Tail has really stepped it up. But I think the key players besides Miracle and Crit is really been Moon, who really just puts pressure. He creates openings. He forces other teams to address him. And that really just gives a lot of space in the first 10 minutes. And after that, that's when Miracle can really shine. So OG, very stable. Meanwhile, MVP got off to a bit of a rough start. And in fact, we're 1 game away from a tiebreaker scenario with Liquid, but Liquid completely bombed in the last 2 days. So I do think OG will take this pretty easily. MVP is known for their relentless fighting and aggression, but they've been abandoning that. They picked Naga a couple of times. So if MVP can reclaim their style, I still don't think that would be enough to beat OG. OG is just way too stable. DC and Wings, I just want to talk a little about the top 2 finishers in Group B, DC as well as eHome. They picked a very stable meta. I guess DC focused a lot on Weeha and getting him Mirana, Elder Titan for Misery, and just sort of basing their strategies off that. And you do have to respect it because you don't want to give Weeha Invoker, and you don't want to give, I guess, a lot of other dynamic heroes towards DC. But they found their meta much like eHome, and they ran with it, and they finished second in the group, if I'm not mistaken. So a ridiculously strong showing from DC. In fact, I do have the stats, which I will show at the eHome, as formulated by Nahaz, as well as Knoxville, showing the projection. Meanwhile, Wings are a bit more unpredictable. They had a very rough day 1, but they really turned on during the second day and the third day, and they still look quite strong. One thing to note is that Drow has been really exposed a lot, and I'm not sure if teams have figured out the counter. You saw it in the last day. EG really struggled versus Broodmother when they picked Drow, and Drow is pretty much the signature hero of Wings if they do have a signature hero. And there was a quote by Wings saying that they get bored if they pick meta stuff, which is good, but, you know, you kind of want to have a solid game plan. But I think Wings is just a better team than DC, and I think DC's lack of diversity will come back to bite them. So I will pick Wings in that second match. You know, eHome versus Alliance, eHome really showed up. They show up hard, and I think a lot of credit has to be given to Old 11. I watched his Night Stalker game against Secret. That was a thing of beauty because they had a very early centric time draft, and this was when Secret still had their momentum before they really shit the bed. So Secret are looking strong, but Old 11 did a Midas spell on Night Stalker in the offlane, which I really love, because if you pick an offlaner like Night Stalker and you just get the Ags without a Midas, they're going to be like level 11 at 20 minutes because the Night Stalker doesn't spend too much time farming, or maybe even later, and you're not going to have any progression, you're just going to have an Ags, and Night Stalker, after a certain point, without any items or levels, is just, he's a walking ward, which is good, but you don't want to have that on the offlane. You want to have some sort of contribution besides that. So I really love the Midas build on offlane Night Stalker. I don't love it on jungle Night Stalker for position, but it's really good on offlane, and I think the Night Stalker really controlled the game against Secret in that regard. But yeah, eHome has also been bringing a lot of Kunkka. They've been picking a lot of Juggernaut. So a lot of sustained, a lot of pressure heroes that really get the ball rolling in the early to mid game, and then they really farm up the item Kunkka to a ridiculous amount. So eHome found a meta, but I will show you in this stat. Most different heroes picked at TI6 group stage. Wings, EG, OG, and Alliance have the most hero diversity, and DC and eHome have the least. So I think that's something to be a bit concerned about. eHome might be playing some cards to their chest, but I think they really kind of went all out. But I will take them over Alliance, even though I like Alliance more personally. Alliance, one thing that people sort of rag on them is that they're not very diverse, and I'd argue that they're very diverse in the hero pools. They pick Wraith King, they pick unconventional mids that Espor loves to play, and they've really been avoiding the Nature's Prophet and the Lone Druid in the offlane for Bulldog. They're trying to put him on different types of heroes besides that, rather than becoming predictable. But I think eHome likes to pressure early. Meanwhile, Alliance likes to look for one big fight and then try to get the map control off of that. So I think eHome's playstyle counters Alliance to a decent degree, so I'm going to take them over Alliance. Now, EG versus Newbie. EG had a very good game day 1, day 2, but they really stunk in day 3. But I think the last game versus Alliance, where they just got run over, is not really something to be taken seriously. They picked a Drought, and they picked only one other range hero, and they let Alliance have Broodmother again. And at that point, EG were already seed 2, because OG had won more games. But still, it's a bit troubling for EG that they they tied 1-1 against a team with a stand-in. So it's a bit troubling. Meanwhile, Newbie had a really rough day 1, but they sort of turned it around. One thing that's a bit of a problem for Newbie, I think, is that they're very good at team fighting, and they're very good at bringing a lot of people. But in terms of coming back after the 20-minute mark, I don't really see them being too strong. And EG is really diverse in this TI, and I think EG, they have a bit of a chip on their shoulder. They came in, I said that you can't really put stock into EG's Oracle and AA mid games and their disastrous performance at Star Series, and I think I was right. But they're a bit of a slump in the last day. You can put a little stock into, but I think overall EG with 3 days preparation, because they get Tuesday matches instead of Monday matches, I think I will favor them over Newbie in this series. The rest of the recaps in this bracket will be a bit shorter. TNC versus VGR. TNC really found their stride. They were 1 game away. If EG beat Alliance in one of the games, they would have they would have had to play tiebreakers Alliance, so TNC definitely showed up to play. Meanwhile, VGR, I think they did it about as well as expected, maybe even a bit better. They didn't do very well at all, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, maybe one of the top players in China, the offlane player for VGR, Yang, is not at the tournament, and that is very bad when you're missing one of your best players, a player that you played for 6 months pretty much. At least 5 months is missing. What can you do? It's not really anything you can blame for VGR. So I think TNC will take this. They've picked a strong meta. They like to pressure early with Coddle, and you don't think Coddle is a pressure hero, but he can pressure early. And they like to pick illusion heroes, and they like to fight. And I think that will be enough to beat VGR in a best of 1. Plus TNC, they 2-0'd LGD when they were looking decent. When LGD was 4-2 at day 1, they 2-0'd Wings. They seem to have a good style on how to beat Chinese teams. Secret vs LGD. I did not think Secret would make it to the winners bracket, but I did not think they would look this bad, and I think it's very troubling. RTZ's played well, but I think the other players of Secret really did not step up their game appropriately. Bulba, after looking so strong in the open qualifiers and Star Series, has really come down to earth. Envy has been playing roles that are a bit unfamiliar to him, playing a lot of Marana, and You can say, yeah, they won the last 2 games, finished, I think it was 5-9 against Liquid, but Liquid just completely looked on tilt, and they picked very odd drafts. LGD, they had a strong day one, but they completely fell apart as well. But I think I'd put more stock into the 1 win against EG rather than the 2-0 secret hat against Liquid, even though Liquid are probably playing a bit harder. And I think LGD, with their draft preparation and the fact that they're so hard to break in the late game, I think I'll take them over Secret. I think this will be in line for Secret. And it's a bit of a shame, but it's unless Secret can really up their play, because I don't think Secret's strategies are that bad. Yeah, they abandoned a lot of things that made them successful, like pressuring the safe lane consistently, and they sort of got back to that against Liquid. But I think just the play of Secret has really been underwhelming, and the draft definitely has a part of that, because easier to execute drafts are more conducive to playing better than harder to execute drafts. But Puppy has been really underperforming, and even in the games they won, his axe is quite bad. He missed so many calls, and this is not a hero that Puppy's unfamiliar with. He played a lot of axe. In fact, it was a staple in the qualifiers, and qualifiers are a different beast than TI, so we'll have to see. Best of ones, anything can happen, but I think I'll take LGD just because they're a bit more stable. Fnatic vs Escape, I picked Fnatic to go to the upper bracket, and obviously they did not make it through, but Escape just looked very bad. They beat Alliance, who Sinner's one of their coaches, or was the coach of Alliance, and they beat Navi, who struggle against weird opponents sometimes, and I don't think Escape is good enough, basically, compared to the rest of the teams in general. And yeah, it's a best of one, anything can happen. And one thing that I noticed about C teams, Southeast Asian teams, is that they don't like picking up gems super early, and Mushi in particular is very trigger happy on his BKB usage, so that might come back to bite Fnatic, but not in this series. Na'Vi vs Liquid, the ultimate disappointment in the group stages. Very appropriate that they meet up for a best of one elimination. I think you have to favor Na'Vi in best of ones, but I just want to talk a little bit about Liquid for a second, and after this the predictions will go by much quicker. Na'Vi had a very rough day one, and then they sort of had to dig themselves out, and other teams propel themselves away. So Na'Vi were always on the back foot, but I think they found themselves, general played really bad in the first 2 days, I think, and that really cost them. And so did Dechira, and I think Na'Vi may have showed too many cards. They've played the last couple of tournaments with pretty much the same style every game, and when teams have more preparation studying it up, then Na'Vi looks a little bit worse for wear. But Liquid, I think sort of similar fate happened to them. And yeah, Kuroki's drafts are very odd. He picked Nyx quite a bit, and it didn't really contribute too much. But I think one of the problems with Liquid is that they showed a very similar style the past couple of months, even though they made second place at back-to-back majors. They like to pressure very early on, whether that's Matoma Man, Lycan, or Lone Druid, and they like mind control on those initiating types, and Fada to sort of semi-carry or even become the primary carry when Matoma Man can't end the game in 25 minutes. And Jarek's been playing like a monster, but I think people have really studied up on Liquid, and their lack of diversity really stuck it to them. And I think Liquid tried to get away from that. They picked a very turtle-heavy lineup in the second game against Secret, picking an Alchemist and a Juggernaut, and 5-position Nyx. No, they didn't pick a 5-position Nyx, but they also had a very greedy off-lane. So it's a bit troubling for Liquid, but I think they'll be good enough to beat Na'Vi. I think Na'Vi struggles against some European teams, but other teams they have decent success on. So I think I will take Liquid, but if you just go purely by group stage results, Na'Vi won more games against an arguably tougher group, even though eHome and DC had better results. I think OG, Wings, and EG are better teams usually. So MVP versus TNC. I think MVP will beat TNC. It's a best of 3, so TNC can have his time to get figured out. I don't really need to analyze that too much more. DC versus LGD, I think the lack of September not being there, and the fact that LG has looked very shaky outside of Navy, and the fact that I think LGD will let DC have their heroes. In the last TI, LGD focused more on playing their own style, and things changed from a year, obviously. but DC have just looked so good at playing their one style that if they get it, they'll be very tough to beat. Plus, it's a best of 3 as well. And not having your full roster LGD can come back to hurt them. Meanwhile, Alliance versus Fnatic, I will take Alliance in that matchup. Alliance usually does decently against Fnatic, and plus I think Alliance has better composure in the mid to late game compared to Fnatic, who just fall apart when it comes to that stage of the game. Although they've fixed a little bit of it in the tournament. Newbie versus Liquid. This is probably all the Liquid matches looks like they're gonna be very tough in general if you go by my bracket. But I think I will favor Liquid. Newbie, they're a very strong team, but I think one of the problems for Newbie is that even though they've made a lot of finals and they've done super well in best of 3s against the top Western teams who before this turn were Liquid and OG, they've not really come out super strong. So, and plus I think I have a little bit more faith in Kuroki. Blitz during one of the casts says Kuroki really thrives on best of 3 series, and it's much easier to beat Liquid in these more chaotic environments. And I think there's some merit to that. Blitz could be speaking a bit biased, but I'll take his word for it, being an ex-Liquid coach. So I will take Liquid in that series. MVP versus DC. The same old style from DC versus MVP, who's a bit more chaotic. I think it just comes down to the first 5 minutes, 10 minutes, honestly, and if DC can get their picks. But I think in this situation, I'd favor MVP. They've shown a bit more looks, and DC, they played very one-dimensional. DC, top 8 with this bracket that I've given them is pretty much to expectations, and I think the meta will sort of be figured out by then, and MVP, who is very known for being super aggressive, will break down what they need to do. Alliance versus Liquid. Alliance usually have a tough time against the top tier European teams, and at this point I think Liquid will be running a bit of momentum, so I'll favor Liquid in that as well. So upper bracket round 2, OG versus Wings. Probably the most weird matchup. Not really the most weird matchup, but Wings plays completely chaotic. Meanwhile, OG plays very stable. And I think OG will go back, look at past games that they've had with Wings, which, have gone a bit even though Wings won the Summit, where OG got second, which is the most recent result. They did 1-1 Wings. And I think OG is a bit more stable than Wings. Wings, when they're on, they are super on, but when they're off, they can get crushed. And in a best of 3 series with a lot of preparation between each day, I'd favor OG in that matchup. eHome versus EG. eHome, they're very good at their style. The question is, can they bring a lot of looks? And it might be useful that they haven't shown too much, and they might be able to surprise EG. But I think EG, if they just sort of stick to what they know and use their experience, which I don't really put too much stock on experience. And eHome has a lot of TI veterans. They have old Chicken, old 11, who played in last eHome and they old LAN-M as well. But I think I would favor EG slightly. This is probably the most coin flip matchup, I think, and this is purely subjective. But EG also has home crowd, and I really hate putting intangibles in Dota, but I think at TI it sort of counts. And having that home crowd against eHome, who probably won't get riled, but might pump up EG, can really be a big benefit towards a team like EG. So I'd favor EG in this matchup very slightly, just simply, most apparently because eHome has not showed too much, and I don't know if they have too much to show. They've, again, Warlock, LAN-M, Kunkka, Juggernaut, Timbersaw. If EG can pressure the offlane and maybe hope for Ice to feed, and not really hope, but expect Ice to feed like once or twice, then I think they can come away with it. So bracket finals, OG versus EG, a little bit of a grudge. Not really. I think the players like each other for the most part, but PPD and fucking Mad have been having a bit of a Twitter war, and fucking Mad is the OG coach, and OG is, again, stability defined, and I think EG has a bit of higher peak if Sumail can play like he did last TI, which is ridiculously well. And meanwhile, I think the weakest link on EG has been Zai, but he might be able to find his form. And then this is Might, so I think I will favor OG in that matchup. Purely because it's going to be like Zai versus No Tail, I guess, in terms of heroes players, but No Tail I think has been very consistent recently. And yeah, I'd favor them quite a bit. So another very subjective matchup, but I think OG will come away with the win, and EG will continue being the losers bracket kings. Now going back to the bottom, Ehome versus MVP. I think Ehome will be able to take MVP. They play much more disciplined. They pressure early, and I think MVP really struggle. You know, there are games where MVP come back from ridiculous deficits, but I think in the majority, and this you can say the case for a lot of these teams, is MVP sometimes go over aggressive, and a team like OG can punish that very hard. So I will favor Ehome in that matchup. And plus I think a hero like Kunkka, who will probably get banned quite a bit, but I think a hero like Kunkka can really stifle MVP because the damage reduction and the torrent and the crowd control. I think Kunkka will be the key heroes of this series. You know, Wings versus Liquid, the Liquid train finally ends here. Wings, they can play a bit off kilter, but not just that, they're just a very good team in general. And I think they'll be able to beat Liquid. I think at this point, Liquid's momentum will sort of abandon them because Wings will take a look and they'll say, all right, well, worked in the group stages against Liquid, pressuring Matama Man quite a bit. You know, forcing Kuroki into these weird drafts can really just cause them a lot of problems. So I will favor Wings in this a decent amount. Ehome versus Wings in the losers semis. I'd favor Wings in this as well. You know, it's a bit difficult to say, but Wings have just shown more consistent past performance, and you can't put too much stock into past performance as TI, but I think Wings' diversity in their numerative number of strats can really propel them to victory over Ehome, who, again, have not shown too much. And just to remind you, stats, Wings 43 different heroes, 24 for Ehome, which is, it's not bad, but it's not great either. You want to be playing heroes that you will get comfortable. You just don't want to bring out, you can bring out a pack strat. I remember in TI4, EG brought out a Enchantress Ursa strat, and that was a complete pocket strat, but you want to have these strats executed. And I think Wings have just shown so much diversity, and again, when Wings is on, they're on, and I think they'll be good enough to beat Ehome. You know, EG versus Wings, they went 1-1 in the series, and this is another subjective opinion, but I think EG will be able to figure out Wings at a certain point. Again, they have experience out of home crowd, which, I mean, again, I hate using intangibles in Dota because I don't think it matters as much as athletic sports, because you know, in basketball and football, you have your own locker rooms, you can sleep at your own hotel, and at this point, 2 weeks into the event, people will be acclimatized to jet lag, you have your own translators, you can still live in your bubble if you're a foreign team. But on TI losers bracket final day, I'd favor the home team, I'd favor EG, and I'd favor them again in a rematch, because I think PBD can adjust. Their coach is not the same, they have SVG as a coach, and I think OG, you know, they're very strong, but they do play a similar style in all their games. Their strength is their stability, and yeah, you sort of know what they're going to do. Crit is going to have a major, every player is going to have a major impact in the game, but I think it can be a bit predictable. Plus, in a best of 5, everything is different, and PPD has shown that he can perform very well in best of 5 as a DSC, and so does OG. They won 2 majors, and this is completely subjective. But I would take EG in this matchup. Again, the home crowd, the fact that they're riding momentum, and the fact they have a bit of a chip on their shoulder. They want to be the first team to win 2 TIs, first team to have a player to win 2 TIs, and they want to win for Zai, which every team obviously wants to win. So I think once you start getting around here, everything's a bit subjective, but I'm pretty confident through here. I'm pretty confident in these 4 picks and here as well. This is probably the most unsure matchup, but outside of that, this is the area where I'm a bit iffy. I think at that point it just comes down to who's playing better, which sounds stupid, but that's often what it comes down to in Dota, as well as basketball. So that's gonna be it. I don't think, maybe I'll find do a couple draft analysis videos that I find interesting, but I don't know if I'll do too much more TI6 videos. Just enjoy the tournament, watch it, and have a nice time. Thank you for watching, and the next video, if it's on draft analysis or having a specific play, it'll be a Dota 1 video probably. So leave suggestions on what you want to see, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks.